Welcome to Dal's Weekly Digest. Dal Bartling here, your Chief Storytelling Officer. Another week has gone by. It's in the books. You know, folks, November is a real special month to me. It happens to be my birthday, but that doesn't make it special. What do we have? Veterans Day. I can recall the Veterans Day parades. And Thanksgiving, of course. And on Thanksgiving, there is a certain event that you see on TV. I maybe have related to you that I lived in a small little northeastern town in Nebraska called Macy, Nebraska. And so on Thanksgiving Day, what is there? The Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. And so we would tell relatives, well, we're going to go to Macy. We're going to Macy to the parade. So some of the recollections that I have there. So the theme that I'd like to use is Thanksgiving, thanks thinking, and thanks living. Let's start with thanks thinking. Think of some special foods maybe that was made over Thanksgiving. Some of my recollections, folks, would be cranberry relish, where Mom would take actual cranberries, make a relish with it, and she'd put some orange zest in it. So she'd kind of scrape the orange, and she would stick that orange in there. And then she'd blend that together, and then she'd put a little Cool Whip, and then get that good and cold. Oh, that was good. Another one that I remember is an Acorn Squash. She'd split that, and so you got that, she'd hollow out that inside of the seeds. And then she would put some brown sugar and real butter. It had to be real butter. And then she would go ahead and bake that. And maybe the last, I would say, 15, 20 minutes, she would then put some black walnuts. And sometimes, it's hard to get black walnuts. But if you've never tasted black walnut, it tastes, to me, nothing like the English walnut. And it's a lot smaller. But boy, it's delicious. So you got that acorn squash that's been baked in that brown sugar, and then you put those walnuts with it. It's very, very delicious. Those are some thanks thinkings that I'm thinking about. And of course, then you had the table. You had the big table where the grown-ups sat, and then you had the smaller table. Of course, as you grew older, you could graduate to the big table. The big table itself. So those are some recollections. Even in the Army, when we were in the Army, my Sergeant Major Bartling, one of the things that he always seemed to make sure he did when he went from base to base, he became good friends with the cooking sergeant. That's a friend you said you wanted to make friends with. And so over Thanksgiving, they would hand out, and he would get a can of one of my favorites. And that can would be olive green, the old Army green. Everything's green, right? It would have in there, folks, fruitcake. I love fruitcake. It would look something like this right here, folks. Do you see this here? Now, I had to get this special. This comes special. No green can. Comes from Texas. But this is fresh pecans on there and that hard jellied. I remember Sergeant Major Bartling, he seemed to think that his fruitcake was dry. And so he would pour some bourbon on it to get it a little moist. Maybe that's why he liked fruitcake. But I didn't get the bourbon on it. But I do know you can moisten it with rum. And it tastes pretty good there too. But I love my fruitcake, folks, here. This is a pound. This is a good paperweight, let me tell you. But that was some of the foods that I like. Thanksgiving. Thanks thinking, and thanks living. But first, let's go to what? Some good old Cowboy Wisdom. I look all over for that, and I'm even getting some from you. So if you've got a Cowboy Wisdom, share it my way. Here's one. If a cowboy is happy, does that make him a jolly rancher? That was a cute one. If a cowboy is happy, does that make him a jolly rancher? I'm going to have to ask that sometimes when I got someone with a cowboy hat on. Now, you might be a Lutheran. You might be a Lutheran. Lutherans very strongly believe in the power of prayer. After all, it's the first wireless communication. It's available 24/7. And you always got a strong signal. So I say, Lutherans indeed believe in the power of prayer. But a Lutheran would rather die than if they're asked to stand up and say a prayer all by themselves. I mean, we'll stand up and say the Lord's Prayer. Hey, that's no problem. Or the Apostles' Creed. But to ask one of us to stand up by ourselves and say a prayer, oh man, we would rather die. That's the side of a Lutheran, folks. South Dakota trivia. Here's one for you. How did a group of failures end up with a good outcome? It happened, folks, in 1874. This group started out here to the west to find their fame and fortune, as it said. You see, they were going to prospect up in the Black Hills for gold. And so they went ahead and did that, staked out their claim. 2 years later, nothing. They haven't found a thing. So they come down the Black Hills in 1876 and along a stream. The Indians' interpretation would be swift waters. They then plotted out a mile square for a town. And their idea was that just like they did for 2 years, those people up there, whether they be the cavalry, the prospectors, or homesteaders, they're going to need things. And so they set up this town. And to bring the goods in, they had to be brought in by oxen. And so not only did the people up in the Black Hills need merchandise, but the means of bringing it, that being oxen and horse, they needed to be taken care of too. And so they had the idea of starting this little town, and they called it Hay Camp. Here's a book that I got from a good friend. It's a historic book. It's entitled Black Hills Hay Camp. And it's got some marvelous pictures of as that town started to grow. And it became a merchandising hub for then items that was needed, merchandise that was needed, again, by those different possible clientele right there. So that's how a disaster, a failure group of 11, after 2 years, they went bust. They came down and they started a little town called Hay Camp along the swift waters, which today we call Rapid City, South Dakota. South Dakota trivia. Hay Camp. Well, the theme was what? Thanksgiving, thanks thinking, and thanks living. What's the Bible say about that? Well, let's do it in maybe this context itself. Of that gratitude, praise, and harvest. So, gratitude. I want to look at 1 Chronicles 16:34. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever. 1 Chronicles 16:34. That takes us on our list, folks, of the next category. So I said first one, gratitude. The next one, praise. So this will be praise. What does the Bible say about that then? Let's look at Psalm 56:4. In God, whose word I praise. In God I trust. Sounds like something on a coin, doesn't it? In God I trust and am not afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? In God I trust. Finally, it takes us to then the category of harvest. New Testament, Galatians 6:9. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Galatians 6:9. So there's a little light on what the Bible says about thanksgiving itself. Now I would like to share with you 12 things to remember. So we got a dozen here. And this comes from an old mentor of mine, Earl Nightingale. I became acquainted with Earl Nightingale when I attended the Winfield University. You see, that's when I could then stick in the car the cassette and play and rewind and play and rewind the mentoring from Earl Nightingale. 12 things to remember. The value of time. Working, thinking, dreaming, reading, working, hiking, doing your hobbies, and more important, being with your family. The value of time. Takes us to the success of perseverance. You know, it can accomplish just about anything. Tom, when he was born, he was only born with half of a foot and a stub of an arm. And yet as he grew, he wanted to always play football. And times he would, get to play football. But certain positions he wasn't comfortable with. But he was determined and he practiced. And you know what, folks? Tom got a scholarship for playing football. And he practiced so much and was so good during college that he became a professional football player. You see, Tom became the field goal kicker for the New Orleans Saints. And in this month, on November the 8th of 1970, Tom Dempsey, with 12 seconds left in the game, kicked a 63-yard field goal, which at that point set a record of the longest field goal. Perseverance. By the way, you know what the record holding right now NFL field goal is? 64 yards. It held for quite a few years, folks. But just think, Tom Dempsey, and he had a stub of a foot, and you think of the balance. You watch the games and the kickers, how they use their arms for balance. The perseverance. Success of perseverance. The pleasure of working. You know, the pleasure of working sometimes comes after the work is done. I look back as a young kid when we, in the summertime, do hay stacking. You know, you drive out, I don't think you see haystacks anymore, but they would have rakes on the front of their tractors, and they would have a cage made, and they would bring that hay and dump it. And I was responsible for moving that hay around and trying to make it then uniform, and it would keep going up and up and up until finally they had to use the rake, and I had to climb on the rake to actually get down. The pleasure of working. Or something as medial as Sergeant Major Bartling would have me collect pop bottles. And then we would take the pop bottles in and I'd get 10 cents a bottle. Now where we took the bottles happened to be where a good friend of mine, Larry, his dad owned the store. So it was a little bit embarrassing on my part, but you know what? Once I got the money, that wasn't embarrassing at all. But boy, doing the work, I hated that. He said, it's time to take bottles in. And I would hate to do that. Clean those bottles and come up to the counter and say, I've got some bottles here to bring in. You know, and of course they'd say, oh, Dal's got some bottles here. Where does he want to take him? And I just, I just wanted to crawl under the table. But the pleasure of working, again, after the work is done sometime. That moves us on to the dignity of simplicity. And sometimes I have a hard time with that, of keeping it simply simple. You know, the Lord's Prayer, folks, is only 57 words. And you know what, folks? It only takes me probably less than 5 minutes for me to read the Declaration of Independence. So, the dignity of simplicity. Keep it simple there. The worth of character. There was a book called A Penny Worth of Character. And it was written by a gentleman that lived in eastern Kentucky. And he told of the account of Sean going to the local grocery store, small little country grocery store, with his mom. And his mom said, Sean, grab those empty bags, we'll take them in, Mr. Connolly we'll want them. You see, folks, Mr. Connolly would pay a penny for the good bags. But a bad bag, meaning it had a hole in it, he wouldn't give you anything for that. And Mom says, how many we got there? Shane says, we got 10. And he was immediately thinking, that'd be 10 cents. And for 10 cents, I can get a chocolate bar and a lemon soda. She says, well, we've only got 9 because one of them's got a hole. So grab them and take them in. We're going in. Shane grabs, folks, all 10 of them. And all the while he's thinking about that chocolate bar and that lemon soda. And he takes it in and he presents it to Mr. Conley. And Mr. Conley just asks, how many do you have there? He says, 10. Mr. Conley doesn't check them at all. He trusts Shane. Shane gets his dime. As he's enjoying, he thought, his chocolate bar and his lemon soda pop, it just didn't have the right taste. Didn't have the right taste in his mouth because he was feeling guilty. And again, the name of the book was what? A Penny Worth of Character. Character is what you do when no one's looking around. And reputation is what people think of you. They're not necessarily the same. The worth of character. That takes us to then the power of example. You know, the older I get, I pay more attention to what a person does and what they say. And with children, it seems like they never are good listeners to their elders, but they're good imitators of what they do. That takes us to the next one, the influence of life. Never forget, there's always people around you watching what you do. The influence of life. The obligation of duty. Maybe I shared with you that I had a high lottery number during the Vietnam War, and I got the privilege of going in for a physical. And in doing so, Sergeant Major Bartling says, well, whatever happens is going to happen. He says, let me give you this little bit of advice on your obligation of duty. Keep this in mind, that the person on the left and the person on your right, those two buddies, is one of your biggest obligations that you have, especially if you're all in the same foxhole. Obligation of duty there, folks. Wisdom of economy. To me, that kind of blends in with that simplicity ones, but wisdom of economy makes me think of Sam's in our area and maybe Costco in yours. I haven't yet quite figured out, folks, how I can go in there and get a roasted whole chicken for under $5. And yet, there was one restaurant here that I could pick up a 2-piece chicken with some instant mashed potatoes and green beans, and that was $10. The wisdom of economy. How about the virtue of patience? Virtue of patience is kind of a matter of trust. Trust in yourself, trust in the system, and trust in others. The virtue of patience. The improvement of talent. That's how you grow and mature. Formulate your whys, and from that, let that be the springboard then to have your talent just grow and grow and grow, folks. The joy of originating, coming up with creative ideas. Be creative. Think outside the boxes, as they say there. All of those 12 things to remember will help build upon your Thanksgiving, your thanks thinking, and your thanks learning. As we sit down at our Thanksgiving dinner, or think of the past, or the present one coming, there were some special dishes because of a special need. That need was a special health need. You see, sometimes those family members or those guests were diabetics, and so special dishes had to be made for them. Folks, we have a premier carrier that can help you with that clientele. Those that are diabetics. It's John Hancock, and it's specifically their Aspire with Vitality life insurance plan. I'm going to give a brief little overview. Please be sure to contact your internal wholesaler and get more information. It's life insurance, folks, designed for people living with diabetes. Diabetes is just one small detail in their life, and they've been living with diabetes. And yet we want to segregate that, folks, and say, oh, well, you have diabetes. We can't help you. Well, with John Hancock, it shouldn't keep them from getting life insurance. We work with diabetics that are type 1 and type 2 diabetics, folks, and they will work with them individually, meaning looking at their own individual health situation. And in doing so, they could receive up to a 25% reduction in their premium. They have partnered with a group called On Duo that has the latest tests, lifestyles, and all of the encompassing of the whole of the person to help them live with their diabetes in partnership with John Hancock. I mentioned this is the Aspire plan with Vitality. Vitality, then, is another partnership that John Hancock has done in looking at the lifestyle and working with Amazon to get a Fitbit watch that'll help them monitor their lifestyle and things that they are doing, or maybe folks, things that they aren't doing. So working together for their success in getting the right match of your particular client, your particular family members' diabetic situation, how controlling they are of that diabetes. But that brings us to the success of the strength of John Hancock on their life products, folks. On the partnership John Hancock has with, as I say, a virtual diabetic clinic. But they'll give them tools to be able to do self-testing and do monitoring on Duo virtual clinic. And then rewarding healthy living through Vitality. And Vitality also in tandem with Amazon. You know, Amazon started with books, and now look at them. I heard today that Amazon is then opening a pharmacy where then medical items can be available there. So as Amazon then expands their horizons, John Hancock is the only life insurance company that is in any type of partnership with Amazon. You know, November is National Diabetic Month. Do you know how many people in the United States have diabetes? John Hancock knows of this group of clientele, 30 million, that they are very much putting their marketing efforts into offering life insurance products to that clientele. Contact your internal wholesaler on encompassing the whole marketing cycle, from videos to look at to items to send out, looking at the need for the diabetic. And I heard just last week from the CEO of John Hancock making a statement that this is just the start of medical impairments that they're going to be niche marketing on. The Aspire with Vitality from John Hancock. You ask your internal wholesaler so you can help your clients and your family members. You know, working with that internal wholesaler, folks, you can give Thanksgiving your family or your client something to something to think about, that they can buy life insurance. They may get that tunnel vision thinking, oh, I'm a diabetic, I can't get life insurance. Not the case, folks. You're going to help them solve that problem, to cover that risk, to move on to what thanks living. And then they'll pass on a big thanks to you. Start with contacting your internal wholesaler. Thanksgiving, thanks living, and thanks thinking. On to our recommendations. The book was a short story, and the author is Louisa May Alcott. And get this, folks, the name of this short story is An Old-Fashioned Thanksgiving. The Hallmark Channel made a short movie of this story. And since 2008, around Thanksgiving, they've always showed it. Maybe you'll be able to see it on the Hallmark Channel. An Old-Fashioned Thanksgiving. How about the movie? Well, the movie has a Thanksgiving scene in it. It's about football, and it also then has an adoption in it. Ooh, those are some things I like, folks. It's called The Blind Side. Now, on the Thanksgiving, I do have to maybe preface this. When they say home cooking, that mama's idea of home cooking is to pre-order a full Thanksgiving meal, go pick it up, and then bring it back to home. But The Blind Side is a very, I think, good, heartwarming movie to watch there. How about the song? The song I have is called The Thanksgiving Song, and it's sung by Mary Chapin Carpenter. At one particular slide, there is an old World War II jacket, and it's got a Sergeant Major's insignia on there. So it's kind of a cool little one there. The Thanksgiving song, go to YouTube, see it there. Well, we have a video from John Hancock, and it's going to cover some of the items that I just kind of briefly covered you on the Aspire Vitality program. So watch those key talking point, folks, and pick up on how many people have diabetes there that they bring up. The power phrase is this: do you have a debt extinguisher? You might have a fire extinguisher. In fact, ours was inspected here at the office just this week. We have a fire extinguisher. Why is that? Do you have a debt extinguisher? And they may ask, what do you mean by that? That gives you the opportunity. Do you have a debt extinguisher for your family?
There are over 30 million people living with diabetes. Until now, many of them worried that they couldn't get the life insurance protection they needed. Even if they were able to get coverage, they may have been paying too much. And they probably didn't have access to the personalized tools and support they needed, nor were they getting rewarded for proactively managing their diabetes every day. That is, until now. Because now there's John Hancock Aspire, the first life insurance designed for people living with diabetes. Now there's a way to save up to 25% off your premium. And it's easy to qualify for coverage. Because at John Hancock, the vast majority of applicants with diabetes are approved. For qualified members with type 2 diabetes, now there's access to OnDuo, a virtual care program with personalized tools and support that transform day-to-day diabetes management. Plus, Aspire comes with John Hancock Vitality, a groundbreaking program that offers rewards for the things you do to live a longer, healthier life. Now there's a whole new way of looking at life with diabetes. Now there's John Hancock Aspire, the first life insurance designed for people living with diabetes.
What did you think of that video, folks? It wasn't long, but it brings up some of the key points, I think. And again, this is just a little tip of the iceberg of some of the marketing things available that John Hancock has put together. Contact your internal wholesaler to get that link where you can see those different items, and then we can order things for you there. Now, the poem. In lieu of a poem, I would like to share this with you, folks. It's an email, and I've sent this email out for the last 13 years. It's entitled, Happy Thanksgiving, to U.S. readers preparing for this month's holiday. Happy Thanksgiving. To my international readers in Central America, particularly Panama, where my family is, and South America. While you're not celebrating Thanksgiving holiday, I think being a giving and thankful person is a key to living a fulfilling and joyful life. So here are a few thoughts I have on giving that I want to share with you. Giving of yourself, your time, your money, your energy is something that takes us from simply being a successful person to being a person who leads a successful life. Giving is what makes us fully human. It is the essence of what we are. People who are here on earth together. Not simply people who hope to get to the top. Yes, pursue your life and your success with wild abandonment. Be responsible for yourself and take ownership of your life, realizing that you cannot be responsible for others, but also allow yourself to be that giving person. Giving is also what allows us to accomplish things way beyond ourselves, and is part of what living our dreams is all about. Living is giving your best self away. Giving and living is helping someone every day. It's respect for all nations, color, and creeds. It's sharing and caring for your neighbor's needs. One of God's greatest laws you can live and believe is the more that you give, the more that you will receive. Folks, God's plan for you is indeed great. And I hope that each and every one of you will have a blessed Thanksgiving. and blessed are those who ease the pain of misfortune, for they shall be called insurance agents. Take care, everyone.